Hey, Mr. Breen, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I feel like I should be doing better though. To be perfectly honest, like the sun is out right now. Like the indoor ban just got lifted in Denver. I feel like things should be going better, but I'm just not feeling it. A little down in the dumps. I don't know.
Yeah, you know
You?
what? You and me both. I mean, the sun is shining, but I don't even care. It's just that's this quarantine and this stay at home stuff. It has literally worn me down. It
Yeah,
has driven me to the ground, and I don't know what is going to be able to pick me up anytime soon.
right. It's just the grind of it all, right? And you
Yeah.
just feel like things should be getting better. But like inside, I just have this like waiting for something to happen sort of feeling. I don't know what it is. Like we're rounding down the school year. I don't know. It's just like it's worn me down. I'm worn down.
Agreed. I keep, like you said, I keep waiting for something good to happen, and it doesn't. It's just, I don't know.
I'm kind of picking up a theme for today.
Ooh,
If
what
we're
theme are you
talking
picking up?
about, well, we're talking about like just being like worn down and kind of depressed, and things seem like they should be getting better, but they never really do. Are we going to talk about like maybe Russia today?
Yes, we are,
Ooh,
Mr. Breen.
maybe that was some of it. We're just channeling like, oh, I just know. I'm going to start doing more voices on the podcast. I think that's
I,
going to be a thing I should do. Is
I
more voices.
I'll be entertained.
Yeah, I love them. And my students, if they heard when I did the Rasputin live show, they know I've got like a one good Russian voice, just like
Very
one good
nice.
English. So we'll do some Russia today. Things are not good for us, comrade.
It is a Russia kind of day. Hey, everybody, welcome to another edition of Storytime with the Historists with your host, Jen Dumont, Matt Barine.
Hey,
And like we said, today is going to be all about Russia. And it's a nice connection to the absolute malaise we feel right now.
yeah. I mean, and it is. I mean, like if we just hop right into this thing, let's just take outside right now. Like it's sunny, it's nice, and Russia starts sunny and nice, right? Like the
It
Russians.
kind of does, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, with the like, so just pure like, there's a little conjecture right at the beginning. Where did the Russians come from? The Russian people. The generally accepted theory, right, is that the Russians are descended from the Vikings, right? That they
Yeah.
rode down from Scandinavia down
Mm-hmm.
the various rivers coming out of the
Mm-hmm.
Baltic Sea. They row into what is now modern day Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and they set up shop on the Dnieper River at Kiev. That
Yeah.
this heart of the Russian people is the city of Kiev then and now. And the Kievan Rus, or the men who row, they get off to a kind of a good start, right?
They really do. Like, as the Vikings settle in between obviously the Baltic and the Black Seas, and they set up some trading agreements with some civilizations. Others, they do their typical Viking thing, demand tribute. You don't give it, we're gonna, raid, pillage, steal, and kill.
Those are my
Um
people.
yeah,
Those are
there you
my
go.
people.
I'm telling you, you'd fit in with the Vikings. The beard alone would
I
would
think I'm starting to look a little shaggy, a little unkempt.
hey, Vikings fits right in.
Perfect.
So they do settle in this land, and they do, for lack of a better word, make Kiev kind of their capital of this territory. And they start, building up principalities, and they trade with the Byzantine Empire, because like the Dnieper flows into the Black Sea, which then gets access to Constantinople. So things are going really good. They eventually
Right.
adopt Christianity under Vladimir.
Right, but
They
they're open, right? And
Yeah.
they've got like, I know there's Ibn Fadlan is the name of
Mhm.
the envoy from the Abbasid Caliphate, who very famously like leaves a record of his time with the Vikings in Central Europe.
Yeah.
Gives rise to one of the best worst movies of all time, Ibn Fadlan's account. Of course, I'm talking about 13th Warrior. Have you seen the 13th
I
Warrior?
have not.
You are not missing much. Spoiler on that one. Most famous for being the movie that lost the most. It's like the biggest box office flop of all time
Oh,
relative to how much money it cost
congratulations.
to make.
Nice.
But it does have heartthrob Antonio Banderas. So
Okay, isn't that like a heartthrob for somebody my mom's age?
yeah,
Okay,
but he's
I just
still a
wanna make
heartthrob.
sure.
I mean, he might have like a throbbing heart at this point. I think he's like 70. He's probably
Didn't he
got
have a
like,
heart attack too?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But after that movie flopped, I'm sure he did.
Probably did.
Yeah. But that comes with like Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead and all that sort of stuff. So the Russian people get off to a good start.
They
Like
do.
they have trade envoys. They're in this awesome sort of nexus between Asia and Europe, but that's also kind of a double-edged sword for them, right? Just being at that crossroads points between
Mhm.
Europe and Asia kind of leads to some bad stuff as well.
It does. So, things are going well from about, I don't know, late 1800s to early 1200s.
Uh-oh.
And then, ladies and gentlemen, wait for it,
The Mongols.
the Mongols.
Cue the
And
Mongoltage. Da, da, da. Sorry, John Green. Ripped you off. That's what we do here on Storytime with the
that
Historists.
is what we do. We're really good at it too. So the Mongols come in around 1237 and they demand the surrender of Kiev, which is under the leadership of Vladimir. And Vladimir says no, because again, Russia is the first place that the Mongols really actively seek to control or for lack, sometimes terrorize. And so it's not like the Russians had any idea of what the Mongols were going to do if
No.
people didn't surrender.
No, they had nothing for it, right? Yeah, and that becomes like a calamity sort of thing because we know that the Mongols had this really vicious surrender or die policy.
Mm-hmm.
He says no, he chooses die, unbeknownst to him probably, because again, these guys are Vikings. They're
Yeah,
descended from Vikings. They are,
they're
even if they've
tough.
gotten a little soft living in the cities, which
Mm-hmm.
like that'll happen to the Mongols too, right? But like they should be able to hold their own in their own minds. And they have no idea what they've run into though.
Right.
So
And they get crushed. They absolutely get crushed. Kiev gets crushed. Novgorod gets crushed. Like it's just a full on slaughter. And part of the reason for that is the lack of surrender. But the other part is that the Mongols never really saw a use for Russia, the Golden Horde part of their Khanate.
right,
It really was more of a testing ground for the Mongol war machine to see
right.
how effective it would be than if they went into Central Asia or China or the Middle East. And spoiler alert, quite effective.
Yeah. I mean,
And it
they used
works.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of like an ATM machine in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah,
They're just
exactly.
extracting wealth. But that wealth extraction does give us, as historians, some evidence to the fact that the Russian people had definitely built up a base of resources. They built
Mm-hmm.
up a base of civilization. And this is really a setback because now instead of like some of the flowering that we saw in like Khwarizm or in southern
Mm-hmm.
China with the Yuan dynasty, like the Russians just basically get left as this backwater. They're cut off
Right.
from the rest of Europe. They're cut off from commerce and trade. They're cut off from basically everything, and nothing's going to be really developed while the Russian heartland is part of the Golden Horde. It's
Yeah,
just
it doesn't, because all those resources that the Russians could have been using to continually develop this Russian territory is going to the Mongols. And the Mongols are not using it for the Russians, they're using it for themselves.
that's right.
The bigger issue that we see, well, I shouldn't say bigger because the slaughter of villages is pretty darn big.
Pretty
the
bad.
the other issue we see is the Mongols move the capital of Russia from Kiev, which is, if you guys know your geography, is pretty close to Eastern Europe, right? It's closer to the Black Sea. You gain contact with Eastern Europe and the Byzantine Empire. Well, they move that capital much farther north and much farther east to Moscow.
That's bad news.
It is bad news because it is so much harder to trade, especially when the Mongols eventually get kicked out of Russia. I don't know if they got kicked out so much as they were just, falling apart. It
Right.
left this huge gap of space between the rest of Europe and Russia. And
Right.
so when the rest of Europe does develop more during the age of exploration, during the Industrial Revolution, Russia doesn't get the benefit from that because they are now so far removed from Eastern Europe. Thanks,
Yeah, I mean,
Mongols.
yeah, that's right. And I mean, and they really do remain frozen in time, right? We've got
Mm-hmm.
here like Ivan the Third, like air quotes, kicks out the Mongols in 1462. I mean, this is Prince Henry the Navigator territory. This
Yeah, right
is
then. Yeah.
we are at that point where the Portuguese are about to dip into the Indian Ocean trade networks,
Mm-hmm.
where the New World is on the precipice of being discovered by
Right.
Columbus, and at that same time that the world is really starting to push forward, we see the Russians kind of moving backwards. Like they
Mm-hmm.
go in and they form these czars. Like the etymology of that word is like emperor,
Yeah.
like Caesar is
Right.
really where it comes from. This like sort of Roman sort of idea. And with the establishment of this new monarchy comes like one of the next great calamities of the Russian people, which is monarchies tend to be hereditary. And in the case of Russia, from this point on, we're going to have like basically the same ruling family. The Romanovs
Yeah.
are going to be the predominant family. And every single time there's a new Romanov leader, it's like rolling the dice of monarchy here.
Yeah.
What are you going to come up with, right? And I know our friend Dan Carlin from Hardcore History talks about this idea of sometimes you roll and they come up sevens, and you're going to get some sevens, which are going to be awesome. A person like Louis XIV, for example. But lots of times when you roll that monarchy dice, you get snake eyes, right? And it seems improbable that the Russians could roll so many snake eyes. Right. If you ever like go to a gaming table when you're an adult, you should go whenever you want. You are an adult.
I am an adult. Yes, thank
right.
you so much.
But our
Well, at
listeners,
least in my own mind. Yeah.
That's right. I'm still a child. I'm Peter Pan. Yeah. I mean, you could go and, you roll those snake eyes. It shouldn't happen. The probability of coming up snake eyes 2 1s is pretty low, yet
the Russians do
Russians, you've got a talent for this, right? So they have some really bad leadership.
Oh,
right?
Really, really bad. And for those of you not familiar with the gambling analogy, it works actually really well. Sevens, like if you're at a craps table, you want to roll sevens. If you roll snake eyes, it is like the worst roll, right? The worst. And Russia does continually seem to roll snake eyes, or even when they get that one time that they roll those sevens, you're like, all right, the hot streak's going to continue. It's going to be awesome. No.
Right? And I mean, their rolls of the dice create such epic monarchs as like Ivan the Terrible, who not a lot of inference needs to be made on that one. Like that's what the people chose to call him. Like that was the best they could come up with. Like I guess it was terrible.
Yeah, he was. That's pretty self-explanatory, and it doesn't get much better. You just not that like these are the worst czars or leaders on the face of the planet. They're not great. It's kind of like the doldrums. You're like, oh look, another czar, and they don't do anything visionary. They don't have the mindset to really improve Russia. They don't have they don't use the resources to do it until they roll a 7
comes up
in 1682 with Peter the Great.
Peter the Great. Now let's talk about what makes Peter the Great, because it seems to me like Peter the Great could have been the Great because like it's like, hey, listen, guys, I come up with new thing to do with potato, and everybody's like, yeah, I mashed it. Right? That could make him great. But in the annals of greatness,
he's pretty
European
great.
Monarchs, he's up there with some of the best that ever were. Right.
Yeah.
So what does he do? Kind of walk us through what makes Peter the Great better than just Peter the mashed potato maker.
The big thing is he's a visionary. He is not what we would consider a traditional Russian czar. He values education. He values foreign input. He's heavily interested in science and math. And you just don't see that in a lot of early Russian czars, right? No. They're interested in drinking and eating and the prestige that the position brings. Peter is different. And so when he eventually gets to the throne, which does take some time, a little bit of a sad backstory, maybe we can cover that in a different podcast because it's really sad. I know. He does become Tsar of Russia, and he decides that above all else, he wants to modernize the nation. They are too far back from everybody else. It's like that they're like everybody else is at a starting line in a track meet, and everybody's like at that line, and Russia's like 50 feet,
they're just off back. Hanging out at like the hot dog stand.
Hot dog stand, exactly.
Yeah, trying to like, oh no, listen.
Oh my God, we gotta catch up. Yeah, exactly.
Catch up, pun.
Thank you so much. So he's gonna modernize. Now, I would love to say that he is someone who is going to modernize everything in Russia. Not quite the case. What he really wants to modernize is he wants to modernize the military.
Well, that's his power.
Yeah,
that's going to be his power.
That's his fascination. And his whole premise is that Russia needs access to a warm water port, right? In order to enter the trading game with the rest of Europe, they have to be able to do it year round. And they can't do it in their normal ports because they freaking freeze, right? And there's no ice cracking boats at this stage of the game.
Right. So we're way up north. We're way
Yeah.
out like east. And like you said, Moscow's out in the sticks.
Yeah.
And so he needs to get some of this warm water access. But of course, to do that, he's going to need like ships. He
Yeah.
needs a lot. Yeah, I mean, he's starting from scratch.
Yeah, he needs a navy. And so he goes abroad, okay, to learn from the experts. He goes to Holland and learn shipbuilding from the Dutch East India Company, which is just the Dutch version of the BEIC.
So the best one in the
Yeah,
world at this
really,
point.
really good.
Yeah.
Goes to Prussia, which has got one of the top militaries at the time, and learns military strategies and technologies, and brings that back to
Nice.
Russia. Goes to England to learn about manufacturing
Early
processes.
manufacturing. Yeah,
Yep.
we talked about that previously. Yeah, that's right around this time period as well.
And then he brings that all back to Russia and says, hey, let's get it done. We need a
Look at
modern
him.
military, a modern economy, a modern navy. And then he even sends out other Russian men to go learn as well. Like he is focused.
Right. I mean, and then he's not just all like, I'm thinking of those people that moved to Colorado. This is like
Yeah.
my elitist, grew up in Colorado, born native standpoint of like people move out here and then like the first thing they do is go buy like an epic pass and they get the
Oh, yeah.
best snowboard possible. They get all the best gear. They go get their Subaru so that they can, drive 1 mile an hour through the mountains. um, and they get up there and they're like, all right, I'm going to do this. And then they go and they fall all the way down the mountain all day long and never do it again.
Right.
And it's like, there was no like action behind deed sort of thing, right? I went
Right.
out and got all the best stuff, but then I never did anything with it.
Right.
That's not him.
No.
Right. No, he does make sure his people look the part. So he does, but it's more than just posers, right? Like he very famously has the boyars, the Russian nobility chop off their beards,
Yeah.
which like I'm pro beard. This is controversial story time with a historist standpoint here. But like AP World needs more beards. It seems to be me and Heimler out there and on the forefront of this. My beard's better than his. Hot take. But coming for you next, Heimler. We got John Green. Now you're next. But at any rate, like in 1704, he actually puts his war machine to work, right?
Yeah,
He actually goes and he doesn't just say, we want this warm water port. He goes out there and he takes a warm water port from Sweden. And Sweden isn't like, it's not like Scandinavian meatball Sweden today, like right. IKEA and everybody's like, oh yeah, dirty. I don't know how to. This all I can think of is the chef
from Muppets. Yeah,
exactly. Right? It's not. That's not
that
them.
Is not how
at that time. I promise you, they were not just like Swedish meatballs. They could fight. I mean, they still had some of that Viking heritage to them. Yeah. They were a feared military still at this point, and so like that's
and the Russians beat them. Yeah,
that's a big win, and so that's it, right? The dark clouds have passed,
right,
and things are now good for Russia forever on, right?
Yep, it's true. It's totally true because Peter's rolled the sevens, and he rolls them actually a couple times. Like he's on a little bit of a hot streak, and then he dies.
Oh no, that's awful. I mean, all deaths are bad.
Yeah, but this is, you're like, oh.
This one seems extra bad. Now, like, is it like a good death? Like, that sounds, but like good? In terms of like he had like a succession plan set up, and his kids were ready to rock and roll.
Oh no, this is Russia.
Just gonna be like we'll do like Dad did, but times 10 best. Like no,
no, not at all. Right. His wife becomes Catherine the Great becomes Tsar, and though she starts off really strong, a little peasant revolt throws her in a big tizzy, and then she cracks down on it just doesn't go well afterwards. And the other thing that I forgot to mention about Peter that actually is really important, he did not modernize agriculture. Yeah, which is a bad idea. So most of the biggest resources Russia has to trade with anybody else is timber and wheat, right? Those are the two big things. And Russia has been feudal for a very long time. You have the boyars, who are the Russian aristocracy. Right. They own these huge plantations, swaths of land, and serfs, who are just like chattel. They can be bought or sold. It's hereditary, work this land. And the only reason Russia is able to produce so much grain is because there are 40 million peasants in Russia, 20 million of which are serfs. So it's simply they have the labor to be able to produce a lot, but their technology is not modern. They don't have concepts of the 3-field system. They don't use modern fertilizer. So they're only producing a lot because there's a lot of people to produce. And Peter does not modernize that. And that
No,
did,
that's a problem. I think
yeah.
I don't want to get too deep into it. Just go back and listen to our "It's Great, No, It Isn't" episode on the Industrial
Hmm.
Revolution to see what needs to happen with regards to agricultural reform and modernization if you're going to take that next
Right.
step forward. That's a necessary. They kind of just glanced past that
They
one, huh?
really did. And it doesn't improve at all.
Mm,
There's no motivation because the Boyers don't want to lose their serf labor. They don't want to lose their plantations. Um, Czars are kind of wishy-washy after Peter and don't want to, upset the balance of power. And so really things take another big step back after Peter dies. And
that's
this is
right.
nowhere more evident than in 1853 with the Crimean War.
Oh, and that's a huge step back
Yeah.
because now I think if we're tracking everything right, when in 1462,
Hmm.
when we saw the Russians liberate from the Mongols,
Right.
they've been playing catch up and catch up and catch up and
Yep.
catch up. And I feel like in their mind, once we get to Crimea, in their mind, they're great. Like
Yeah, they feel like they've caught
they've
up
done it.
at
Yeah.
least decently. Right.
Right. And then they start looking at, well, they've got some warm water, like quote unquote warm water ports, because the Baltic's still
It's not that warm. Yeah.
north. Yeah. But I mean, they're trading now. They're out
Right.
there in that space. And now they have an opportunity because the sick man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, seems like it's imploding on itself in the second half of
Yeah.
the 1800s.
Which it
And
is.
now you can get a port in the Black Sea. And the Black Sea, that was the heart of where we started all this. That's what
Right.
the Kievan Rus had tapped into back before the Mongols cut them down at the knees. And so it's like, hey, this is an opportunity. And the Russians move into the Crimea, into Odessa, this trading area. They're going
Hmm.
to go trade. They're going to make it into the Med. We're not too far from the Suez Canal being opened up.
Yeah.
Like this is a big get if they can get it, and they don't even get close.
No, yeah, this had they gained control of the Black Sea, that would have been huge. Like that's I mean, they're fighting for the Black Sea, midway through the 20th century as well. And they don't. They just can't get it because they suck.
Yeah.
Now, in all fairness, let's give, credit to where credit is due. It's not like the Ottomans themselves defeated the Russians, right?
Oh no, I'm sure the Russians are looking out and they're like, look, this, we got this, we got these guys, and then the Ottomans. I'm not even going to do an Ottoman
No, I
accent
don't.
because
Yeah, no.
that's sticky wicket right there. um, but they're looking across and they're like, these guys don't know what's coming, and then the Ottomans play their trump card, which is the British, like,
Yeah.
oh, cheerio, because the
Hmm.
British in 1853, they are in the mix of flexing on the world.
Oh,
Right? We had
totally.
talked about this.
Yep.
They've knocked over China. They've knocked over India,
India.
or in the process of
Yep.
right at this point in time, knocking over India
Hmm.
and setting up the Raj. Like the Russians, that's not like they're not worried. The British aren't scared of the Russians. They're just going to be wiped to the side, and then the British can start meddling in the internal affairs of the Ottomans to start getting territory
Right.
in the Suez, and
Right.
eventually snatch that prize. So the Russians think like they show up thinking like we'll beat this other guy who's also old man, and like no man, they walk in there
And
and they literally brought a knife to a gunfight.
yeah, because the British, and the reason the British, it's not like the British were like, we love you, the Ottomans, and we're total allies. It has
No,
nothing to do with that. They saw the writing on the wall. The Ottomans were eventually going to fall. Russia was a bigger threat to them at that standpoint, and they did not want Russia to gain access to the Black Sea because that would have really, really inhibited the British attempt to not only get the Suez Canal built, but to control the Suez Canal. And the
right.
reason, for those who are not aware, the Suez Canal is super important to the British because it dramatically cuts down the transportation time from India to London,
Right, exactly. Yeah, I
which is
mean,
where all their resources are coming from. Yeah.
yeah, it's a geopolitical
Oh,
prize, right?
totally.
If you can hold that territory, and so the Russians get pushed right off the map,
Oh, it's
and they're
embarrassing. Yeah.
right back to square one in a
Yep.
lot of ways because again, and we kind of goofed around about this, but they thought they were there. I mean,
Oh, they
the
did.
country thought that they were there, and they're not even close.
Mhm,
Now they have to realize, like, we have to go back and start making some reforms.
mhm.
And if you're going to make the real reforms, then you got to start at the heart of the matter, which is the agricultural reforms that we've talked about in the
Right.
past.
And they did. They're like, look, we can compete with the Ottomans. Like when they looked at the Ottomans, they're like, dude, we can totally take them. I don't know how much they were looking at anybody else in Europe, because it became after the Crimean War. They're like, damn, what just hit us with the British? And that again reinforces the idea. Well, great, we're 12 steps behind again. So now they got to industrialize. They know it. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. But to industrialize properly, the first step you have got to do is make sure you have an ample food supply, and you don't need everybody on God's green earth to farm that food supply so you survive, right? And so that and Peter hadn't done that. No czar had done that previously. And so we're going to tackle that in 1861, 1862 with Alexander the Second. He's going to free the serfs from the boyar population, and he's like, serfs, you are now freed from the land. Go work in these factories that hopefully we're going to get newly built.
Yeah, exactly, right. And this seems like this is going to be the step that makes it all possible
Right.
for the Russians to get there. But again, it's not full on reform.
No.
It's small scale reform. It's the type of reform that is helpful in getting you to like 16th century,
Mhm.
17th century English levels, not 19th
Correct.
century English levels.
Yeah.
And the other thing to keep in mind with this is that the czars don't give up a lot of power. There's not a
No, they're
lot.
absolutist. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of the social reforms that have gone along with industrialization, that doesn't occur as well,
No.
right? And so, while this is a step in the right direction, admittedly,
Right.
very important, it's not going to be the type of thing that delivers the outcome that the Russians are looking for. And again, we have proof of that, right? Just like in 1853, we have the humiliation on the battlefield
Mhm.
of Crimea. At the beginning of the 20th century, there's going to be more humiliations
Right.
at the hands of outside powers as well, and that'll start to spur more change, right? And
Oh
so
yeah,
that's our
it's
Sino or not Russo-Japanese
Japanese,
War.
yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and part of the problem is this is that the way that the Russians can't do industrialization on their own. They don't have the expertise, they don't have the experience, they don't have the middle class, they don't have the education. So they're going to rely on British and French experts to come into Russia and help set up the factories and get everything going. Well, the only way they can pay for that is through timber and grain. But you
right,
just freed the serfs from the land.
right.
You don't have a coerced or forced labor system to produce all the grain you're going to need, not only to pay for industrialization, but then also to feed your people. And you haven't updated the farming technology. So, what ends up happening is, even though they gain this labor source with these now free serfs who are peasants, the food that they are now producing by peasants who are still working the land, that's going to cover paying the British and French.
Right.
It ain't going to cover feeding your people.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They haven't put in the time and the effort, right? And this is that well-tread path that we've talked a lot about with regards to modernization. Is modernization wasn't just one thing, right?
No.
It wasn't just freeing the serfs. It wasn't just creating the technology. It
Right.
wasn't just creating the social contract. It was all of these things happening in
Mhm.
concert. Modernization is a band, and you need all the different elements
Yeah.
playing together.
Mhm.
There needs to be that syncopation, or else it
It
just
doesn't
doesn't
work.
work.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what the Russians run into here. And then there's also this like added step, and a little of this is editorializing, but there's a laziness to the way the Russians bring in the support as well.
Yes.
When we look at the way the Japanese went out and elicited support from Western powers, there was a lot more of a hands-on feel. There was a lot more of like, we will learn to replicate this and that we will take things over for ourselves.
Right.
Whereas the Russians, oftentimes, you get this really cheap sort of version of like,
Mhm.
well, we want you here, but we still want to be prestigious, and in our minds, we're great still.
Mhm.
And so it just doesn't come together.
Mhm.
Things are done lazily, right? And I know you have some examples of that laziness that kind of coincides with this late 19th century push of modernization.
Well, yeah, because okay, so one of the other big problems that Russia is going to face is when we look at successful industrialization in France or United States or in England, it is not led by the government. It is led by the people. It is led by a middle and an upper class, right?
Right.
Because industrialization that the government has to cover is ungodly expensive. So because there's no middle class, the government has to fund it. But this government doesn't know how to run it. This is not a democratically elected,
No.
educated government system. This is an old school absolutist system.
Czars. They call themselves czars. They're still Caesars in their mind.
And so they do. Part of the reason they're hands off is because they don't know what the hell they're doing. Right? Leave it to the French and leave it to the British and let them figure it out and do what they're going to do. And we'll have Russian peasants work in the factories. And that's not a great idea. They've had no experience whatsoever with anything other than feudalism. And now you're going to throw them in an industrial factory. That is ridiculous. The boyars don't want this at all because the boyars are the plantation owners. They don't want things to change. They're super rich.
Their power.
Yeah. Their life is awesome. Okay. They're not going to be like, oh, you know what? Let's just spend a tremendous amount of our money to modernize the technology on the farm so that industrialization can be more successful. They don't care.
No, the analogy there would be the American South during right before the American Civil War, right? Yeah, they have
their system.
They have no desire to do any of that as well.
Yeah.
Right? So, go ahead.
And then, and so those are all, so that is just going to put a wrench in the industrialization process. And even when you do have people who are good, like Sergei Witt, who was like the minister of finance, who knew what needed to be done, knew that foreign capital had to be brought in to help them, was responsible for the building of the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which actually is a good part of the industrialization because it does allow Russia to connect all their different regions and get resources.
Even though it's a crappy railroad.
Yeah, it's a crap. Yeah, it doesn't work in the long run.
It's one of those like Western sort of like the Trans-Siberian Railroad is. I feel like it's got this really romantic view, and it sucks.
Yeah, it's like
not cool.
It's like Big Thunder Mountain at Disneyland.
I've never been.
Oh my gosh, Mr. Barine.
I know. Always a contrarian.
So Russia does industrialize, but it's like this pseudo industrialization. It's not high level. It's not efficient. The conditions of the people are not improved. So while on the surface it looks different, in reality, it's not much different from what we've seen in Russia in the past.
Right. And so we're at this very fragile moment, and this is the last time we'll get to roll snake eyes again. We get, beginning of the 20th century. From the imperial standpoint, right, is that you get a guy like Tsar Nicholas II, and he is like the worst of them all. Like if there could have been negative snake eyes, like,
it would have been him rolling zero on a dice that has no zero.
Exactly. Yeah. You're thinking of it the same way I have. Exactly. Like if somehow, some way that could have been what happened. Like the last one was the worst one of them all.
Oh, he was just. I mean, he even admitted it when he was going to become czar. He's like, "Dude, I'm not ready. I don't think this is a good idea."
Anybody but me, not me. Like, and then you kind of wonder, like, I did the whole Rasputin thing, but it's like, why is it like, oh yeah, is this peasant from Siberia? He'd be in charge. Like he was looking for anybody to be in charge.
Well,
and then at the very end, he's like, I guess I'll be in charge. And that was the final nail in the coffin.
Right,
when he finally got hands on, it's the worst possible outcome.
Even when he admits that he doesn't know what he's doing, once he gets in power, he's like, don't challenge me. God picked me. I'm like,
that's right. Yeah.
Dude.
Like, when we have like Bloody Sunday and then the Duma tries to get some control. And I mean, these are well hashed out things that we've hit in class, but like, he's got to, but that's the trappings, because if he doesn't do that, then everybody's going to know the emperor has no clothes and
people are going to feast on him. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and we know how that ends for him.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't go well. Execution. So at the beginning of the 20th century, Russia is technically industrialized, but it is like a poor man's industrialization. I mean, that's the best way to explain it.
It is.
That is shown through the loss of the Russo-Japanese War. Yeah, because the Japanese do more in industrializing in 20 years than Russia did in 100.
Right. Yeah. And there was another rehashed Crimea, like we talked about. The Russians show up and they're like, oh, yes, we show these Japanese, they sink all our boats already, huh?
Right.
Like, well, they didn't sink your boats. They sank on their own.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that happens. And then the Russians go back to the lab, make some reforms. They start to try to make these like half-hearted reforms. And then we get to World War I, and we talked a lot about the Schlieffen Plan, and the French and the British that sucked the Germans all the way into
Yep.
France. They bogged them down long enough at the Battle of the Marne. The Russians should have been able to just walk into Germany and take it, and of course they
They don't, because it sucks. Their reforms
Because
didn't work
they couldn't get
again.
anybody. Yeah, they couldn't get people to the battlefield. Most of those guys didn't even have guns. Can you imagine that for a second, showing up for the biggest war in world history?
Without a
And the
gun.
Russians are like, no, the guns are coming. I promise. Just keep walking. Like,
And the Russians had like 25 million soldiers ready to
ready
mobilize,
to roll.
and they didn't have the modern technology, the modern
No.
guns, the artillery, nothing. They were literally like 17th century soldiers dressed up to look like the modern military and got slaughtered. Just
Yeah, the
crushed
Germans
again.
had one army guarding the back, and then they sent the Germans get Ludendorff over there, and he's like, "Why did you guys even send me? I could have gone over and won in the west. Why'd you send me east? Like a hamster could beat these guys. These guys are not exactly good at what they do." And then so we know Lenin takes over,
Right.
and he starts to make some reforms, and things are going well. And then we get Snake Eyes again. He has a stroke.
Right. And Stalin, the one guy who could have led Trotsky gets
Trotsky,
killed assassinated by Stalin. Yeah.
He's ice picked in the back of the head.
Jesus.
Yeah. And that's great. And then Stalin's just amazing. I mean, I think the one thing that's our next. No, I'm just kidding. He's not.
I was like,
He's
what
horrible.
exactly is your definition of amazing?
Yeah, well, he's amazing at destroying things.
Oh,
and
he
messing
is.
it
Like
all
he
up.
excels. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about the famine in the Ukraine, and we talked about the show trials, and we talked about how bad the Russians are at the beginning of World War II, just as bad as they were at the beginning of World War I.
Yep.
And
it
then
doesn't get better.
Stalin dies.
Yep.
He has a stroke, and it's like, oh, here's our chance. And then you get Khrushchev, and it's one after the other, all the way up to Putin, right? Like, you have like.
I'd
the
be really
Soviet
careful
Union falls
saying
apart.
don't say anything
we're
negative
on
about
the
Putin.
internet.
They're listening everywhere.
He's listening everywhere,
Yeah.
right? But like, like how can one group of people, just be so snake bit? Like they just over and over and over again, right? It's a sunny day outside for the world, and
Not for
Russia is Russia.
Rainy. Did you ever see the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO?
Yes, I did. Yeah, it was
so
amazing.
there was a really poignant line in there that the Russian people are some of the hardiest, hardworking, and hopeful people on the planet because they are willing to sacrifice to make tomorrow a better day for the Russian people. And I just think that fits so well. Every single time a new czar comes in or a promise of revolution, they believe again and they follow it with all their heart, and then it collapses. And then someone else comes in and says, we're going to make it happen this time. And they follow it with all their heart, and it collapses. And I just think that's kind of the story of Russia.
Yeah, I agree. It's not their fault. I mean, and that's a good way to end this is that there's nothing bad about the Russian people. I think all things considered, you give those people with their industriousness and their willingness to always find the bright side and to push through all that mountains of crap that have been heaved upon them since the beginning. Give them a chance. Right. And they could probably do amazingly great things because they've done pretty amazing and great things despite everything else.
Right. I know. Yeah. Unfortunately, that is probably not going to happen under Putin. So,
See all those coronavirus doctors keep falling out windows.
Yeah, I know. It
makes
disgusting.
you really, So, yay, another uplifting sunny side episode of Storytime with the Historists. But hey, it's a World History podcast, and that's what we're here for on the World History Podcast Network. That is Storytime with the Historists. We are all about that history. You know it. Well, thanks for joining us again. Mr. Breen, as always, a pleasure. It was a lot of fun. Thank you. All right. We'll see you again next time. Bye.